Wonder if you can fish the swim jig around cattails. Come on, fish on the swim jig. There we go. There's one on the swim jig. Keeping the pressure on him. Oh yeah. Fishing the swim jig. That fish wanted some swim jig action. Good little chunk, a little over a pound. Probably a pound and a halfer. All right, another fish on the old swim jig. Through the old duckweed, there he goes. Hey, hey, oh, where'd he go? There we go. Bye, little fish. All right, fishing friends. Well, if you can't tell, today we are talking about the swim jig. If you missed the first video on how to set up your swim jig, picking the swim jig and all that, I'll have that baby linked up top. But today we're going to be talking about the how, when, where, and why of swim jigs. So the how do you fish the old swim jig? Well, it is not that hard. There's really 3 ways to fish the swim jig. Number 1 is give it a nice long cast like so, and just do a steady retrieve. Now the big thing that's important with the steady retrieve is finding the depth that those fish are at. Sometimes they want just a nice, slow, steady, subtle retrieve, and that will get you all the bites. I don't generally fish it just that way. I know a lot of people that do and have success though, so try that out first. The second way to fish the swim jig, and this is the way I fish it the most, this is the way the old timers tell you, that's to toss that swim jig out and keep bouncing your rod tip. Bounce that rod tip the whole way back. And you can even mix in there, sometimes I'll give it kind of hard pops, and then just regular twitches, hard pop, regular twitch, hard pop, regular twitch, and just mix that up, keep that bait moving. There are a couple reasons for that. As we talked about in the first video, the primary action of your swim jig is going to be that trailer. Today I've got a boot tail on, there's a bunch of little crappie in here, I know. So I'm hoping to trick some of these bass and make them think that this baby is a crappie. So the nice subtle primary action of that tail is the first thing moving, but the reason for the rod tip twitch is because of this skirt. That skirt just bunches up just like this as the bait's moving. But as you twitch the rod tip, this skirt puffs and flows and kind of does this movement. And that looks just like the gills or fins on a fish. It gives it that nice subtle secondary action that a lot of other baits don't have. If I was just fishing a regular boot tail, that's it. It's just the boot tail kicking back and forth to make that fish eat it. That is the primary way I fish the swim jig. Now there's a third way to fish the swim jig. Cast that baby out like so. As you're reeling it in, most people usually do this with kind of a steady retrieve, and as they're reeling it in, they'll do a quick half turn of the reel handle. And you just kind of mix this in. You can count 1, 2, 3 reels, give it a quick turn. 1, 2, quick turn. 1, 2, 3, quick turn. 1, 2. What you're doing is giving that bait a little bit of an erratic action. So take, for example, a square bill. Square bill bounces off stuff, gives erratic movement, bounces around, hops around. That's what you're trying to do with this. Instead of just one steady standard retrieve, if there's a fish falling, you want it to react. As soon as that fish goes to dart away, that's when a lot of those fish are going to grab it. So those are the 3 main ways to fish the old swim jig. There's another one off the point. That brings me to my second question. Where do you fish the old swim jig? Well, the swim jig is extremely versatile. You can fish this baby anywhere. The swim jig is so versatile because of a couple things. Number 1, it's only got that one hook on top. Number 2, it's got a weed guard. So you can honestly fish this through brush, fish it slow through brush and wood. You can fish it through grass. Now that we're going through late summer and into the fall transition, a lot of that grass is drying down. In the hot summer months, this is my go-to moving bait of choice most of the time when I've got grass around. It comes through it well, it gets bit, it's nice and subtle. But you can also fish it around riprap rocks like this, around riprap banks, little fishing jetties that come out. This baby is awesome to fish it off that, bang it into rocks, pop it around those rocks where those fish are hiding. I guarantee you'll get bit, especially with the fall bite like this. Fish are moving up, they're feeding on the shad and all the other bait fish. They want to get their chunk on so they can be nice and full for winter. Look at that. I think that's an otter. That must be a sign. I ought to be fishing the swim jig today. Oh, anyway, when do you fish this baby? Well, you otter fish it when the otter says so, or you can fish it in clear water. That's the first thing I look for, and the only place I used to fish it when I fished the swim jig was in clear water. Yes, the swim jig is more of a sight bait. As you can see, there's not a lot of crazy rattling stuff or flashy stuff or spinning stuff on it to attract fish. So generally this is a clear water presentation. However, as of late, this year and the end of last year, I was fishing it in darker water and having a lot of success. So I've been fishing it everywhere, and I have caught fish in stained water, clear water, and even pretty dirty water when I was going back and forth between flipping and swimming, and it's worked great. How about time of year? Well, this baby can be fished all through the year. Pre-spawn, when those fish are feeding up, it looks like a bait fish perfectly. Post-spawn, when they're getting back fed up, you can even throw a white swim jig on beds and bed fish with it. I use it all through summer. This thing comes through grass really well. You can fish it through wood well. So really, time of year doesn't matter. I'm gonna fish this baby all the way up. All these fish are feeding on bait fish up through until it gets really, really cold. You know, you start fishing those winter type baits, but man, right now when those fish are still actively feeding, I'm throwing it. Awesome fall bait, tends to get overlooked. I know a lot of people will switch over to that spinnerbait, and don't get me wrong, I love the spinnerbait. It mimics a little school of bait fish, but This thing I'm gonna keep fishing this year and see what kind of luck we can have on it. Swim jig is also great to fish on days where it's kind of high sky like this, a little bit more pressured. It's just a little bit more natural looking bait. So instead of having, you know, a spinnerbait with the big flashy crazy blades, or a chatterbait that's putting out a whole bunch of vibration, oftentimes you need to, what some people say, go a little bit more finessier with your presentations, a little bit more natural, a little less crazy movement and such. And the swim jig is just that. A swim jig is just a finesse down spinnerbait or a finesse down chatterbait. Doesn't have all the hardware on it, a little bit more natural looking, and I love it for days like this. There's one. Oh, wow. Oh, did you see me pop it right there? He hit it right as I popped it. Oh, that's a good fish. That is a good fish up here in the shallows feeding. Nice. What do you think? You think these fish are feeding up? That guy's got a messed up eye. He still smoked it. Good golly. Look at that thing. All right. How about that? How about that on the old swim jig? Let's get this big girl back in. Oh, look at that fish. That is a good sized fish. Even with the messed up eye, woo, she is out.